This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this is our 2018-19 preview of the Central Division, a division that has seen the King walk away once again. But who's ready to take over Camelot? There's definitely a few teams that are ready to take the throne. Can't wait to discuss it. Got a great cast of people ready to drop on this. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holler back at me, Mr. Shaw. Are you centralized in the mix?
You know I am, homie. You know I am. It's going to be an amazing show, talking Central Division. This is one of our more anticipated shows in some ways. I've been getting some texts and some messages from our homies and some of our listeners out there about this division, when this preview is going to drop. So here we go. But as always, salute to all the fans listeners of NBA Baseline. Again, I can't wait to jump in. I got an amazing guest on. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely, man. Our man, Ben Stinar from Amico Hoops is going to hop on board in the next few moments, and he's going to help us break down the Central Division. So this is going to be great all around. He just recently did an excellent article covering Colin Sexton, who we will be talking about when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So you definitely know that he has got his finger on the pulse of everything that's happening in that division. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in to the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee. Available on all the major handles, but the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. So we encourage you to chime in, hit us up on any of those handles. We love to respond. We love to react. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Download that platform, plug in your headphones, drop back, and allow us to get you ready for this upcoming NBA season. Also featured on Dash Radio. You know where to find us. One of the premier online radio stations that is moving upward and onward. Nothing but net radio, Baseline NBA podcast. It's damn it, we just doing damage to your airways, man. Be sure to lock in with those dudes so you can lock in with us. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I
down.
break you down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our 2018-19 preview of the Central Division, a division that may post, for me, the most intriguing question is, who is ready to take the reins post LeBron James? And I think we have definitely one of the better people to help us, pull it all together and really dig in with these five teams that represent the Central Division. It's our man, Ben Stinar. He represents Amico Hoops. Ben, thank you for hopping on board with us to break down this Central Division, brother.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, before we jump in to do the previews, I always throw these questions out to our guests who are helping us do our previews. I wanted to get your sense of what your overall view was for the Central Division in 2017. Not so much with, each team individually, but just in perspective, the dynamics of what we saw from a talent perspective, the competitive nature, and really what your expectations are going into this season now that one of the biggest players, the best players in the game of basketball, has decided to take his talents out of that division and move to a completely different conference, different coast.
I think it was a very interesting conference last year. You have LeBron James, the best player in the world, so the Cavs are going to win the division. But it was two tales. One was the Pacers coming out of their shell. That shocked everyone. Oladipo became a star. The Pacers became a legit Eastern Conference, I guess you could say, contender, even though they lost in the first round, but they're still a Eastern Conference contender, no doubt. They won 48 games. But you see, the Bucks and the Pistons were just dreadful. I mean, compared to where their standards were. The Bucks not as bad, but still, Kidd got fired, and they were not living up to expectations. And then the Pistons were just a mess. They didn't even win 40 games in the East. So it was kind of a tale of two ends, one surprise and then one, big letdown. And then obviously the Bulls, I don't think, not to leave them short-ended, but no one really thought the Bulls were going to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up some really excellent points, which we'll dig into, because a lot of that is a referendum of how we're evaluating what kind of progression and expectations we have for these teams that are coming out of the Central Division. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Obviously, the way we do our thing is we start from the cellar and work our way to the top. And unfortunately, a team that has been occupying the cellar space of the Central Division is the Chicago Bulls, and they've been doing it for a few years now. This is a team that finished 27-55 last season, 26th in scoring, 6th in rebounding, 27th in defense. And I'm going to start with you on this one, Ben. One of the things that really stick out to me is what kind of talent or what kind of team are we talking about is going to be a representation for the Chicago Bulls. I think they struck gold in their draft of Larry Markkinen, but now they find out he's going to be gone 6 to 8 weeks. They do some, off-season moves, but nothing that really strikes a chord in people saying that the Chicago Bulls are giving you a sense of what they want to be. I'm kind of curious from you, is this a blessing in disguise that Markkinen does go out 6 to 8 weeks? And how much is this now? Are we looking at whether or not Fred Hoiberg as a head coach is really good enough to work with the talent that he has to make this team better than what they represented last year?
Yeah, I mean, they're an interesting group. They have a lot of young talent. You look at Levine, who just got a lot of money. Then you've got, the guys, Chris Dunn, it goes down Denzel Valentine. There's young guys, Bobby Portis. It's an interesting team. I personally, don't know too much about Fred Hoiberg. I actually interviewed Royce White the other day, the former Rockets player who had anxiety, and he had his college coach was Fred Hoiberg. He raves about him. But at the NBA level, I don't know too much about the NBA level, but just kind of unbiasedly saying, I don't think he did a good job when they had a good team. Remember, he was the coach when they had D Wade, Rondo, and Butler, and now they weren't great. They're at the end of their primes, Rondo and Wade. The team struggled. There was a lot of chaos, and it just didn't seem like he had control of the locker room. And I don't know if he's the right guy moving forward. Like I said, I don't know too much going on there, but I'm just saying, I don't think he's the right guy going forward. I really don't. And I think this could be his last season because, as you mentioned, the Markkinen, he's out, and he was, probably their best player next year. And the team's not very good, and it could be another 25-win season. And I think they're going to move in a different direction. That's my opinion.
So as I jump in here, I think the Markkinen injury opens up a lot of different questions. I think we put out even on our social media Twitter polls, who in essence now should be the starting power forward. A lot of people, most of the league really doesn't feel Parker should be playing the 3. And now with Markkinen down, Parker can probably slide to that more natural in today's NBA kind of 4 slot, so to speak. But that right now apparently is going to elevate Justin Holiday, a Cal favorite here, to potentially be the starting small forward. So Ben, as you're looking at this roster, who would you start at the 4? Would you just go ahead? Because I know Portis has said in the summer that he's very comfortable in the bench role. But would you have started Portis, or maybe even get Wendell Carter Jr. maybe some run at that 4th spot? But right now it seems like they're going to go with Jabari. But what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, that's a great point. I saw a lot, from a beat up team last year. I actually saw some flashes of brilliance from Bobby Portis. In a serious note, he played pretty well at some stretches. But to be honest, I think coming from Duke, he played on a great team and he got overshadowed. Carter is going to he's the real deal. So my answer would be Carter. I think Carter.
Well, isn't it? But here again, doesn't this kind of put us in a quandary a little bit on how we're assessing what this team is actually trying to accomplish, what they're doing? It's one of my biggest pet peeves. Sean knows I harp on this so many times, and especially when we do these previews. One of the things that really get to me is when you are going out and you are making a play in free agency, that you are acquiring assets, or you're acquiring players, or you're acquiring personnel that either cater to the identity of what your team really should be, or that you are getting players that essentially will make your team competitive and make them better. Now, if you go out and you draft a guy like Wendell Carter Jr., okay, and this is a high draft pick, this is practically a lottery draft pick, there is no reason in the world that this guy should be sitting on the bench learning from other guys, or you questioning whether or not that you're going to try to find some minutes for this dude. This guy needs to be in your starting lineup. So when you find out that no one is going after Jabari Parker, while I love Jabari Parker, and maybe that's more Milwaukee's loss than rather it being Chicago's gain, again, we now have to pose that question. What are you doing getting a guy like Jabari Parker, signing him for 2 years for however money that's out there, but you have this draft pick, this phenom player, this guy you kept talking about that you're targeting and that you wind up getting, you now have them in your grasp, but yet these guys essentially are playing in the same position.
Well, their management, we all know, has had some hiccups. We'll put it lightly, so to speak.
Burpees, man, call it burpees. Forget hiccups, burpees.
And then they started to right the ship a little bit, and obviously the Butler thing went the way it did, or whatever. So they got some nice pieces, and obviously got a great piece in Markkanen. I think Wendell Carter Jr. While we're 100% on the same page of this, I think he should probably be starting from the get go. But Markkanen was going to start at the 4, and Parker was going to start at the 3. So the real question is, why can't you start Carter at the 5? If that should have been the original plan. And I think that's one of those things that they're going to just transition into. And again, we beat up teams a lot about this point in general. But I think Robin Lopez, while he is there, he's very much like Tyson Chandler in Phoenix. Just don't really know why he's still on the roster, but nevertheless he is. I think Wendell Carter Jr. will assume that starting 5 position, maybe not the 4 position, that starting 5 position at some point, and if they did figure out what they're going to end up doing to Robin Lopez. But I want to throw it to you now, Ben, as well too. Outside of that front court situation, do you see especially a big leap for Zach LaVine now coming back a year after, hopefully being after that injury? And can he be a 20-point per game guy and really give the Bulls some thrust offensively?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I just want to just end off what you were saying about the 5 position. I completely agree. Wendell Carter and Jabari Parker are not the same position. They're maybe quote unquote the same position, but they're really not. I mean, Parker's a wing player. Carter's more of a back to the basket kind of player. And so I think that they could coexist. And at the same time, while I do agree that Parker was a little bit of a strange signing, he's only 23 years old. I don't love the money they gave him, but he's only 23 years old. So I just wanted to, say that there. I think that him and Carter could definitely coexist. Going to what you said, LaVine, yeah, I mean, we haven't seen him consistently stay healthy. He's had a lot of health problems, but he's got a lot of talent. The Timberwolves, it looked like, he was part of that big core with Wiggins, Towns, LaVine, and obviously they went in a different direction. But LaVine could be really good. I don't know. We haven't seen him from a health standpoint consistently put together 80, 82 game campaigns.
So real quick, Ben, before we, move on to our Westgate odds, to that point, one of the things that I do think that if you are the Chicago Bulls is you clearly have to be a better team defensively. Okay. Probably part of the reason why is that they don't show a lot of athleticism. So even to your point now, what we were just talking about with Wendell Carter, you have some athletic guys. I'm just wondering, how are you going to incorporate and use these guys? Because this team is going to continue to struggle to score the basketball. And to your point, this may be an indictment on Fred Hoiberg that he cannot envelop a consistency for these guys to go out there and score points the same way that maybe the Philadelphia 76ers score points or the Indiana Pacers are scoring points now. But there's got to be something about this team that you can look at with the talent that's there and say we can get something from these guys immediately. Even if Markkanen is not on your starting roster at the beginning of this season, and to your point, Zach LaVine could be that gem. I'm wondering, where is it that they're going to improve further? Is it going to be on the offensive side of the ball? Is it going to be on the defensive side of the ball? Something has to give because they can't be worse on both sides of the ball and expect to win games.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think Fred Hoiberg's looking for the answer himself. I don't know. It just seems you're right. There's such a collection of, like you said, what is Robin Lopez even doing on the roster? I mean, it's just they're kind of all over the place. I think that they just need to go in just the young direction and just accept they're not going to be that good for a little while, but keep developing. You got LaVine is young. You've got Carter, he's 19 years old. You've got Markkanen, you got everybody. But, to your original question, I think that they definitely need to pick it up on the defensive side of the ball. They're all talented offensively. They need to, kind of lock in defensively. I've seen Brad Stevens get these guys obviously different scenario, but he's built a culture as a young coach and a young team. They're going to be a good defensive team. And Hoiberg should be doing that with the Bulls.
All right, let's go ahead and talk Westgate odds. Shaw, the Chicago Bulls are slated at 30.5 games. I find that to be extremely generous. But what say you? Are you taking the over and under on the Chicago Bulls?
Yeah, I'm gonna go maybe just slightly under, and I don't think that they're gonna be a lot worse from last year. I think they can have some opportunities to improve. I'm still worried about them, especially from a bench standpoint. Last year, they were actually 7th in bench scoring. Their starters are so much better now. So I think that's something that's going to maybe tail off with Bobby Portis and probably Denzel Valentine kind of leading things off. Offensively, I think they are going to be better just from having Dunn healthy from the beginning of the year, Levine healthy, Parker injected into the lineup as well too. So I think we're going to see some improvement on that side. But overall, they're just a young collection of talent that needs to learn how to play together, and I think that's going to get them off to kind of a rough start to begin with, especially with marketing being out to begin the year. So I think them just slightly under, maybe at 28 wins. But if they got to the 30 mark, I wouldn't be surprised.
Very similar to you. I think that they will be close. I don't think it'll be far off at all. It's weird. You think your initial reaction may be, under. So it's weird how they said it at 30.5. I do think it will be under. I just look at the Nets. I look at the Pistons. I look at teams, you looked at last year as being bad teams in the East. And I see them being better than the Bulls. I see the Bulls being down there with the Hawks as the two worst teams in the East. That's just me.
All right, yeah, there you have it. Nobody's feeling bullish about the Bulls' chances of exceeding that 30.5 threshold. Callie Warnshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast was our special guest. Ben Stinar from Amico Hoops. Be sure to check out Ben. He writes great pieces, and you can catch him on Twitter at Ben Stinar, Stinar. Because we don't want to get people confused with the Steiners, right?
Yes.
Which was one of my favorite tag teams out there, the Steiner brothers. No relation to that. I completely understand. By the way,
where'd that come from?
by the way, Ben, I just wanted to applaud you, man. And as far as your writing goes, man, you wrote a great piece. People didn't have an opportunity to check out on Amico Hoops. You sitting down with Colin Sexton. We'll get into that when we talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, but just as a prelude, man, I just want to applaud you on a great piece that you wrote covering Colin Sexton and his role with the Cleveland Cavaliers for this upcoming season, and really the work that he's doing, the terrible work that he was doing with Lil Yachty. Great stuff, brother. All right, so let's go ahead and transition ourselves to the team that finished 4th in the Central Division, and that would be the Detroit Pistons, a team that finished 39-43. Listen, to say that this was a disappointing season for the Detroit Pistons, I believe, is an understatement. And a lot of overhaul at the end of the season. Stan Van Gundy gone. No, not just as president of basketball operations, but gone as the head coach as well. In comes Dwayne Casey. They wind up, obviously, doing what was necessary to kind of keep the fold of Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond because of that trade that took place last year around a trade deadline. But they wind up getting Glenn Robinson on a 2-year deal. They signed Jose Calderon. They pick up Zaza Pachulia. So, what we're talking about here, Ben, with this basketball team is there is an air of confidence that they think this team can take a step forward rather than the 2 steps backward. There's still a lot of question marks, however, about the overall competitive nature of this team and the tone and tenor being set. So my first question to you is, did they strike a home run in getting a Casey, who is fresh off of being coach of the year with the Toronto Raptors? And will this instill confidence in that tandem between Griffin and Drummond to really be the trendsetters for the Detroit Pistons to surge themselves where they should have been last season, which is one of the top 2 or 3 teams in that in that division?
Yeah, Dwayne Casey he's a great coach. I would be shocked if they didn't improve drastically. I think we don't know about the playoffs as much yet, but as a regular season coach, he's proven to be elite. And I think that they did strike gold, but that team has had some major competitive issues, like you said, and I'm not sold on Blake Griffin as a franchise player.
So for me, when you look at this Pistons roster, obviously Casey coming there is probably the crown jewel of anything they've done in this offseason. And I'm going to go a little left here because I'm not enamored with anything at the point guard, shooting guard, or small forward position. It's kind of a hodgepodge. I think we all have given up on Reggie Jackson as Reggie being that guy there in Detroit. But even at the shooting guard, you got Reggie Bullock and Luke Kennard, Langston Galloway vying for minutes. And at the small forward, or maybe you can say maybe either one of these guys can go to the 2. Maybe Stanley Johnson can play some too. But Glenn Robinson III, I think, is a guy who I'm most looking forward to seeing what he's going to be able to do under Casey's tutelage, so to speak. Ben, where do you stand in terms of, maybe that swingman position? Who do you think is going to stand out from that kind of crop of players they have in Detroit this year?
Yeah, I mean, they've got players. They got Bullock. They've Reggie Bullock. He can shoot threes. They've got Reggie Jackson. I don't know. I mean, it's just they've got a lot of turmoil because they're focusing on, in an era where we're looking at shooting and 3-pointers, they've got 2 big men. And it's not like Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins were in New Orleans. It's Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. Neither of them can really shoot threes. I mean, Griffin thinks he can shoot threes, but they can't. They're not shooters. So I don't know. They're going to need to upgrade at that wing possession, pronto. I don't know what they're going to do because it's not like you said, Reggie Jackson. We've kind of just accepted he's not going to be a franchise point guard. And look, they drafted Luke Kennard. We didn't see much of him. And enough of this coaching, GM role. You know who was the next pick after Luke Kennard? The Pistons drafted 12th overall Luke Kennard. The 13th overall pick was Donovan Mitchell. So I'm just going to leave that one there.
Well, I'll jump in here, because one of the things that's interesting to me about Detroit, while we talk about their shooting, so to speak, you're looking at the roster, you're like, okay, where'd it come from? Somehow last year they finished in 5th in three-point shooting percentage, at 37%, which is a little shocking, based on what you saw from the roster. And again, they turned it over a little bit as well too. But I think you make a great point in terms of the defense trying to be the way, because I think Blake has ability, because he's athletic, quote unquote, and has some switchability. He should be able to have some principles there that hopefully Case will be able to have him buy into. I think Stanley Johnson and Glenn Robinson III, those are two guys too that are going to be able to help, and maybe those are who we'll see, at the 2 and 3 position. But I want to go back even to talk about Griffin and Drummond offensively. Last year, Detroit started off very high, and then they fell off a cliff. I remember we were talking about them, and they had won like 13 or 16 games or something like that to begin the season. And everyone's like, where does this come from? And they said they just went left. And a lot of that was due to a rebuilt offense. Now with Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin there, Drummond showed the propensity last year to be a guy who can actually run the offense through. He did a lot of great dribble handoffs, from the free throw line extended. Now you have Blake there coming in as well. Ben, where do you think this offense runs through? Because again, we've already alluded to that Reggie Jackson is not that dude. You're not going to run it through the wings. You'd run the offense through Blake or Andre Drummond, knowing that they both now have shown the ability to even pass the ball as well as score the ball.
I think that the offense, I guess the initial answer would be Blake Griffin. I mean, he's your quote-unquote superstar. He's your face of the franchise now. I mean, Andre Drummond may have that. But, you've got Blake Griffin. You're paying him $30 million a year, and he's Blake Griffin fame-wise. It's going to go through Blake Griffin, I think. But the X factor, and going back to the backcourt, is I think if they can, and this is Dwayne Casey, he could be good at this. If they can figure a way to get Stanley Johnson, he's an X factor. If they can get him involved, that could change the world for them. We saw, I'm not going to compare him to Donovan Mitchell, but we saw what a young shooting guard can do for a team. And I just want to lay something out here. Stanley Johnson is 6'7", and he was a 5-star recruit. He was a top 10 recruit. This is not some, middle tier player. He was a 5-star recruit and a top 10 recruit out of high school. He was regarded as big time. And we saw what Dwayne Casey did with DeMar DeRozan. Just going to leave that out there. They're the same build. They're the same kind of player. And we saw what he did with DeMar DeRozan.
Well, listen, and you bring up an excellent point. This could actually be one of those scenarios to your to what we were talking about in getting a guy like Dwayne Casey, because I really do feel like I think we talk in exhaustion come draft time about the tools that a lot of these guys bring to the table, and it just irks me to see that none of them can completely show themselves to be what we even think that they may become. Okay. I don't know if it's, and I'm not putting the blame on just head coaches or anything like that. I'm just saying the atmosphere doesn't seem to be conducive for us to get back to the matter at hand. Is some of these coaches and staff have to start developing these guys to play the game of basketball at that high level. And some of them just are not doing it.
Yeah, I think that Dwayne Casey, and I hate to say it because I really don't like the roster that much, but I think what we've seen with Dwayne Casey, playoffs aside, in the regular season, he is an elite coach. He is an elite head coach, and he extracts the best out of his team. And there's never any, we didn't hear chaos in the Toronto locker room. There's a lot of cohesiveness. We heard a lot of chaos last year. Kind of seemed like what was going on in Detroit. They were all over the place. I think that this team will win above their odds. I would take the over on them.
And for me, I look at Detroit, and it's one of those things. I'm going to start off and say, yeah, I'm going to take the over as well. I think it can be a 500 team, maybe 42-ish win. So maybe I guess mid to slightly over. But it's one of the other. They're either going to be well over or they're going to be well below. Because of the locker room issues that potentially are already there. how much can you rely on Casey to fix everything, so to speak? You have some guys going into contract years, even Ish Smith, although he's not a fussy type of person, I'm sure he's going to want to lock up a deal and get some minutes. Stanley Johnson is in his contract year, not going to get an extension likely before the season starts. Reggie Bullock contract year as well too. So I think this is a team have potential-wise because of Casey's tutelage and the way he can maybe figure out a rotation they can get over. But if it doesn't go right, like I said, I think this can end up being like a 30-win team if things go really sour, especially in the locker room.
All right, well, there you have it. The Detroit Pistons definitely riding the pine on this one. They could be all good or it could be all bad for the 2018-2019 season. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 2018-19 preview of the Central Division with our special guest, Ben Stinar from Amico Hoops, helping us break down all 5 teams repping out of the Central. So let's go ahead and talk about the team that finished third in the Central Division, and that's the Milwaukee Bucks, a team with a 44-38 record. A lot of drama through the course of that season. First having Jason Kidd as the head coach, and then amidst that drama, they went with their interim head coach Joe Prunty, who finished the rest of the season at 21-16. Was good enough for them to come in and get this team at least to the first round of the playoffs. I'm going to start with you on this one, Ben. It's kind of interesting. You look at this basketball team and you say to yourself, 44-38 is great, because it's the Milwaukee Bucks. But if you have got arguably one of the freakish athletes, a guy who really at this particular point now should be in the conversations of an MVP kind of candidate with Giannis Antetokounmpo, You've had somewhat of this trifecta with him, Middleton, and at that time Parker, which that obviously didn't pan out. You start looking at this and you're saying, you know what, 44-38 is kind of a disappointment because this team finished 7th in the conference. This really should be a team that somewhere should be in the middle, like a 4-5 seed in the Eastern Conference. Why is it such a struggle for us to have that kind of expectation for this Milwaukee Bucks team?
No, it's not. I mean, I think that they should be, and I don't seem crazy for saying this. I think that with the team they have this year, and you've got another year of the Greek Freak. I mean, you can't keep saying he's young forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's there. They got to be a 50-win team. They got to be damn near close. That is where their roster is at. That may be a little harsh, but that's where they're at. They have talent, and when you've got a franchise player like you alluded to, you can't just have excuses. I will say this. I don't know what the exact reasoning was, but I like Jason Kidd. I really do. I may be a little biased. I think Jason Kidd is one of the greatest basketball minds we've ever seen. And anytime he goes somewhere, it turns to I guess, winning, if you'd say. I know they weren't great with him, but he has something about him. Maybe it's not so great for a young team. Maybe it's more of a veteran team. Fine. That could be a reason. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that because I really thought that he could have been the right guy to, mold the Greek Freak into that. Remember, he turned him into a guy who brings the ball up the court. That wasn't something he did before that. So we'll see what happens with them. I think that they need to be a 50-win team, and I think that is a fair expectation.
So when I look at Milwaukee, I get scared for the rest of the Eastern Conference because I really feel like this is a team that should go leaps and bounds, where they were from last season. You bring in Coach Bud over to this roster now. You have the Greek Freak over here as well. So many great things I think Milwaukee is going to be able to do, with themselves, offensively and defensively. I'm really looking to see what ends up happening with Brook Lopez. Does he come out here, space the floor, in an acceptable way so that Giannis can operate. Chris Middleton just doesn't get enough credit for his ability to create off the basketball, and create for others, rather, I should say. Bledsoe, you would hope he's now settled and can figure out a role for himself. I think the biggest question I have for them, though, is like last year they really struggled in terms of getting some bench scoring, and that's because some roles, oscillated, especially once Bledsoe got there. I think Brogdon is going to be the starting shooting guard, kind of solidified as such right now, and they're moving away from Tony Snell. I guess my question is for you, Ben, is really out of that starting lineup that we're potentially seeing now, Bledsoe, Brogdon, Milton, Giannis, and Brook, who off the bench are you looking at right now to kind of give them some punch?
Yeah, I mean, they got Tony Snell. I mean, they've got guys that on that bench can play. And I want to see Snell do more. I think that they've got Brogdon. Is Brogdon coming off the bench, or is he
He's
going to be in that line?
he's quote unquote slated to start right now. So I guess there is still some question whether or
Okay.
not Brogdon or Snell would start. But I'm going to go ahead and think Brogdon's going to be the two guard right now.
Okay, well then I guess as you said, Snell or Brogdon could be one of those guys. I'll go with Snell, and if it was Brogdon come off the bench, I'll go with Brogdon. I think that they need that guy off the bench who can bring them a good defensive mindset off the bench. Keep that what the starting unit is doing, and continue that off the bench because, like you said, they they don't have the best bench, and that is something they definitely need to work on. Going left a little bit off what you said about Brook. Completely agree. I think Brook Lopez was one of the best signings of the summer. You get a guy in Brook Lopez who is a former All-Star. He's still relatively young, and the guy can shoot threes now. I mean, he's got the back of the basket game. Not a great defender, but offensively, and then in Coach Bud's system, he fits perfectly what they did down in Atlanta. And I think Brook Lopez will be the steal of the summer. Timofey Mozgov is making $17 million next year. Brook Lopez is making $3 million.
Yeah, the numbers definitely play for the Milwaukee Bucks. But I think another interesting point that has to be made about why the Brook Lopez signing was actually significant for Milwaukee is, the Milwaukee Bucks have been a basketball team that severely struggles to score when Giannis Antetokounmpo struggles to score the basketball. And while a lot of this is centered around creating that space and allowing Giannis to go out and do what he doesn't at times enable the rest of the basketball team when he's not in his zone to get these guys to step up and score the basketball. And sometimes it could be hit or miss between Antetokounmpo and Middleton. Now, Chris Middleton, to me, out of all of these guys, has the potential to really balance out the way that Antetokounmpo plays that keeps the Bucks in basketball games. But since he's not at that level yet, having a guy like Brook Lopez, a big who gets you those baskets, and to your point, Ben, shoots the three ball, I think helps stymie a lot of the struggles that the Milwaukee Bucks tend to have in late game situations.
Well, yeah, I think with Lopez, definitely he's going to be immense for what they do offensively and even somewhat defensively as well, too. He's still one of those guys who does a nice job blocking shots. Again, he's not going to get 4 or 5 blocks a game and things of that nature, but he has pretty good timing, and he just knows his role, and he's not going to do anything to upset that locker room as well, too. So I agree with what Ben said, too, in terms of Lopez potentially being a steal of the summer, especially for this team in this roster who definitely needed somebody at that 5 position because Henson, as much as we like him, he's just not a guy who should be starting and playing, 30 minutes a night. So Lopez going in there and taking over those minutes is going to be huge. Also, the fact that, it's crazy where we're talking about today's NBA, right? Talking about Lopez and even Ilyasova, these two guys are going to help Milwaukee's three-point shooting. They were in the lower third in three-point shooting last year. Now they're going to be relying on 2 bigs, Ilyasova and Lopez, to kind of vault them up the standings a little bit when it comes to three-point percentage. I'm also interested to see what ends up happening with Dante DiVincenzo. Does he get minutes? That's something I'd ask for you, Ben. Can he be a guy who plays any type of role off the bench for them at that 2-guard or 3-guard position?
You read my mind, actually. When you finished, I was going to ask you guys, do you think he's going to be a one-hit wonder from Villanova? He had that amazing tournament, and that really put him on the national stage. I will say the counter to that is I did watch a lot of Villanova this season. That was not a fluke. He did that all season. He came off the bench and played his role all season. So I'll give him that. I was going to ask you guys that question, but I'll switch over and answer it. I think he will play. I think he will be a solid player. I don't see him being a star player. I don't see him being maybe even a good starter, but I see him being a solid player. And I think he could contribute. He's got that killer mentality. I mean, you just throw him in. Everyone saw the national championship. I mean, on the biggest stage of them all, and he goes off. And I think he'll play a role. We'll see how much Bud gives him, how much string he gets. But if he's given the opportunity, he's definitely capable. And I just want to swing it over one more time to Brook Lopez. I know we keep talking about it. Last year he averaged 13 points a game, and his rookie year he averaged 13 points a game. Every year other than those 2 years, he's been a 17-plus guy. 17 points, 20 points, multiple 20 points, 19 points. This is a elite scorer and healthy scorer. Other than the 2 years with his foot, he has been a consistent, the last 5 years, 70-plus games player. They got a steal at $3 million. We cannot stress that enough. And he could be huge for what they're trying to do.
All right, well, then let's go ahead and talk Westgate odds. Sounds like we're feeling pretty good about the Milwaukee Bucks stepping it up. Speaking of stepping it up, Ben, they have the Milwaukee Bucks at 48.5 wins. Are you taking the over or under that the Milwaukee Bucks can exceed that total?
Like I said, I'm going to go with my gut was my expectation for this team is a 50-win team. So I'm going over. And I think that sometimes, Vegas likes to be a little tricky sometimes too. And, they show someone that if I'm a casual bettor and I'm going to the thing and I see 48.5, I'm like, hell no. So I think it's a little bit, can they really win it? I think that Vegas is putting it that high because they believe they will win it. So
All right.
yes, I'm going over.
Chips are all in for Ben Shaw. So what are we talking about with the Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah, this is just, we're talking about the steals they have potential. The only concern I really have for them is really the overall bench production at large. But I think this is a team that can learn how to play defense. I love Coach Bud and what he's going to be able to do to this. You have a potential MVP candidate or even MVP winner on your roster. Chris Middleton continues to be one of the more underrated players in basketball, in my opinion. Hopefully Bledsoe is back online. Long answer short, I'm going to go with the over on the Milwaukee Bucks.
All right. Well, there you have it. The Milwaukee Bucks, a dangerous basketball team. And listen, quiet and deadly. Nobody's talking about them being an actual threat to any of the other teams that represent out of the Eastern Conference. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 2018-19 preview of the Central Division with our special guest, Ben Stinar. Be sure to catch Ben on Twitter at Ben Stinar, and that's Stinar. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the team that finished second in the division. Obviously, one of the most surprising teams in the NBA, and that was the Indiana Pacers. And this is, by all stretch of the imagination, in my opinion, the best coaching job I've ever seen from Nate McMillan. This basketball team finished with a 48-34 record. They finished second in the division, and this was a team that basically helped bring the rise of the Oladipo. Victor Oladipo's coming out party is fresh out of Indiana, tried and true, like he probably did his thing fresh out of Indiana University. You can tell between the yellow and the red what was going on with Victor all season long, because my man was just straight bananas when he played. And so this is a basketball team, Shaw, that when you look at it, there's no reason for this team not to be the top dog in the Central Division and be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Not a lot has changed with this basketball team, but they did sign Tyreke Evans. They signed Doug McDermott, a.k.a. Doug McBuckets. They got Kyle O'Quinn. They also brought in C.J. Wilcox. They drafted Aaron Holiday, so another Holiday to be celebrated in the NBA annals. And then they also drafted Elise Johnson. This is a deep and dangerous basketball team that really should not be overlooked.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is. The one thing you can say about this team is that they're not going to surprise people this year. We've seen this now. We know who they are. And the one thing that really can help them tremendously is that Miles Turner didn't have a particularly good year. I was very skeptical of all the praise heaped upon Turner last year coming into the season, and he didn't deliver, and he was injury plagued and things of that nature. If he does finally take that step, look the hell out. This Pacers team could be tremendous, especially if he's going to be playing at an acceptable level. And I know Victor Oladipo said he's been, everyone's in the great shape and the summer's been amazing. But Oladipo himself is saying that Turner could potentially be the most improved player this year, like how Oladipo made that turn from last season. I think they have a potential 6th man of the year candidate in Tyreke Evans. I think he's accepted his role and what he can do for teams right now. Overall, this Pacers team seems to be very, very good. The only thing I didn't love was that I think Thaddeus Young, and I guess they didn't have a choice, Thaddeus Young ended up opting into his deal. I would have liked to see him potentially leave and maybe give some more minutes for Sabonis at that 4th spot so they can develop some of the other young guys. But getting Kyle O'Quinn, the defensive presence, although he's supposed to go Golden State, come to Indiana is a great backup plan for him. I think this Pacers team has all the right mix of players and talent to go ahead. And again, even Aaron Holiday, as you alluded to. So my question to you, Ben, is really where do you think they stand in the Eastern Conference in terms of their overall development and what Nate McMillan can do with this team?
Oh, the Pacers are a top 4 seed in the East, and they are the definite winners of this division. There's no question. The Pacers are going to be a very good basketball team. Victor Oladipo is a bona fide superstar, in my opinion. I don't care there was one season. What he did last year, it wasn't empty stats. He put up 23 points a game. He averaged 2.5 steals a game. He was probably one of the best shooting guards in the entire conference. They got Sabonis. Just from that trade, it was unbelievable, the players that showed up. You said Thaddeus Young, you would like to see him go. I don't mind Thaddeus Young. Maybe you could put him off the bench. I like Thaddeus Young. I think he brings toughness to that team. You add Kyle O'Quinn. You add Holiday. This team has potential to be a very good team and could go far in the East. It's an open East. It's definitely an open East. The Celtics are loaded, but it is an open East, in my opinion. There's no top dog. There's no LeBron James. And I want to lay something out here. Victor Oladipo is only going to get better. He is 26 years old. He is just hitting his prime. And, history repeats itself. I just want to run you through something. Victor Oladipo committed to Indiana University as a 3-star recruit, okay? A 3-star recruit. LiAngelo Ball was also a 3-star recruit. We've seen what's happened with him. Victor Oladipo, through several years at Indiana, became the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft. So what does that mean? He enters a 3-star recruit, maybe not even an NBA player, okay? He turns himself into the 2nd overall pick in the draft. It took him a few years. He wasn't a one and done. You look at what he did in the NBA, kind of seen as a bust. Took him a few years. Now he's a star. He's only going to get better. He's a guy that needs time, and I think history has shown that. And they could be dangerous this year.
So are we talking about, Ben, real quick, are we talking about this being an MVP-like type campaign for Victor Oladipo?
Depends on the Pacers' record. I think that would be a little bit of a stretch. But if Oladipo gets up to that 27, 28 point per game range and the Pacers win 50 games, you got to put him in there. I don't think he wins it, but he's got to be in the discussion.
All right, Shaw, I'm going to throw this back to you and excellent points, Ben, because to me, I think this season is indicative of what not just the Indiana Pacers, but the Indiana Pacer fan base needed, because I think you're going to see a sustained level of quality play from this basketball team moving forward, which I think enables Nate McMillan as being a head coach. I feel like he's Dwayne Casey 2.0 in his approach. He some of these guys have to go through these learning curves. So it's interesting now when you look at the signings that this team has gotten in the off season, you can make an argument, Shaw, that this team can be as dangerous as any team, that we're seeing right now, because it looks like they've got players to fill in gaps and holes. They're a team that can rebound the basketball better now that they have Kyle O'Quinn. They got guys that get out there that can get buckets when their stars are flaming out, something they couldn't do when they were in the first round in the playoffs against the Cleveland Cavaliers and getting Doug McDermott and Tyreek Evans. And then you have a little quasi dynamic now where you could probably throw Oladipo and Evans out there. And I'm telling you, I would be really intrigued to see that tandem out on the basketball court against most teams that they play against on a nightly basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's penetration to the max. Those two guys, just going to pound the ball and get to the rim and create for others. If that's the route that McMillan decides to go. And, we haven't even mentioned Bogdanovic, who had a great year for them, shooting the basketball and even did a little play creating. I know he was a little inconsistent here and there, but Bogdanovic there means McDermott doesn't have to play. They don't need him to produce. It really takes a lot of pressure off of him in that mold. And again, even going back to Evans, I really do believe we're looking at a potential 6-man of the year guy here. And the fact that he can play on the ball or off the ball, depending on whatever Indiana may need. And Oladipo had a couple of nagging injuries last year. So if Oladipo needs some rest, Evans can go right in there and start at that position. What I'm interested to see, as I alluded to earlier, is obviously the development of Miles Turner. Does he take that next step? But this point guard situation is very interesting as well, too, because I think if they feel at some point they need another piece, and I don't know where exactly where that would be, do they feel like they need more shooting at some point? Maybe they throw Corey Joseph out there as a trade bait because they have Aaron Holiday, who I think can come here and be very, very good. But Joseph is, they're not pushing him out the door or anything like that. And they got Darren Collison on a very friendly contract as well. But I think if they really wanted to feel, all right, do we need another piece? I think Corey Joseph could be a trade chip. Where do you see this Pacers team needing the most improvement? Although we've gushed about them, Ben, where do you see this a team that they can actually do a little bit of improving?
Yeah, I like your points about going out, maybe use dangling Joseph as a trade piece. I think that they need a bigger guy who can be a star. Not a star like Oladipo, but a guy who you can count on if Oladipo's an off night, put up 18, 20 a game, kind of that secondary Robin type star. They need a tandem to go with Oladipo, kind of a big man. And they've got that in Miles Turner. You made a great point. If Turner takes the leap, you better watch out for this team. If Turner, it looked like he was going to have that leap last year, but then Oladipo stole the show. And we kind of forgot about Miles Turner. Miles Turner's a really good player. If he can take that leap, watch out. Otherwise, I think they're going to need, whether it's a small forward, power forward, they need kind of that just combo to go with Oladipo. Hit him off the pick and roll, a guy who can put up 18 to 20 a game on any given night. Maybe on average 18, 20 a game, but they can put up big numbers when they're needed. I'm trying to think, Thaddeus Young isn't that guy, but someone like a better version of a Thaddeus Young, kind of that size. I'm talking about a combo guy who's big, but he can shoot. they need the poor man's version of Thaddeus Young, so the richer man's version. So Thaddeus Young would be the poor version. They need the rich version of that.
All right, well, let's talk Westgate odds. And Ben, not to, kind of feed off your frenzy of thought here, but re-chime back in right now, man. The Indiana Pacers are slated at 48 wins. How confident are we that they're going to leapfrog over that total?
Well, I think it's funny. What did we say? 48.5 for the Bucks, right? 48.5.
Right.
Yeah, and exactly. So I think that's almost funny that the Pacers are half game below. And if I said the Bucks are over, I got to stick with the Pacers over. I think that people are going to think that they may take a step back, and that's very fair. But I'm all in on Oladipo. I think Oladipo is going to end up 23 a game last year. I think we start seeing 26, 27, and I see them maybe 49. They'll be right around there, maybe 47, they may be 49, but they're going to be right around there. I'll go over.
All right, y'all, talk to me. What we talking about with the Pacers?
Well, I want to make one quick point on them as well, too. Is like this, they're going to figure it out all this year. They have a bunch of guys who are going to be free agents next year. Thaddeus Young, Tyreek only signed on a one-year deal. Bogdanovich's contract is up. Collison's contract is up. Corey Joseph, as alluded to, his contract is up. Kylo Quinn is on a one-year deal, and they still need to sign the extension on Miles Turner as well. So they have a lot of goodwill and equity in this locker room in terms of a chemistry standpoint, but you do kind of wonder what ends up happening, if things don't go exactly the way it's supposed to. That said, I think this is a team that should be well over 48 wins, right up there with Milwaukee, potentially past Milwaukee in terms of challenging for the Central Division title.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 2018-19 preview of the Central Division with our special guest, Ben Stinar from Amico Hoops. All right, so there's only one team left to talk about, and then obviously we'll get right into our predictions for the division, and that would be the Cleveland Cavaliers. There's not a whole lot to say. The Cleveland Cavaliers have been the gem of the Eastern Conference last 4 seasons, thanks to LeBron James. And obviously, if LeBron James walks, how much of this team is going to be impacted, I think is going to always be the bigger question. This is a team that finished 50-32 last season. And one of the interesting things, Shaw, that I think we're going to take away from this is the idea that because LeBron James leaves, that there's this air that this team is going to struggle so mightily the same way that he left the first time around to go to Miami. I don't think that that's the case. Obviously, there was some key offseason signings that I think helped this basketball team. And when you look at this is still a team that you should not just discredit or discount simply because LeBron James has gone to greener pastures in Los Angeles.
Yeah, you could go a variety of different ways. You could have said that, they should have traded Kevin Love. They extended Kevin Love. And whether or not he actually finishes that contract out, that remains to be seen a couple years down the line. But this is a roster and a team that's very proud. And they are going to compete and be competitive in the Eastern Conference, and even more so in the Central Division. They signed Rodney Hood kind of last minute. I don't think Hood expected to not be as wanted, in free agency, and he ends up having to kind of come back on a prove-it deal with Cleveland. But he's back. J.R. Smith, Jordan Clarkson, those guys, to see what they're going to be able to do. I'm really interested, and I'm bearing the lead a little bit here, as we already talked about Colin Sexton a little bit. But I'm really interested to see what ends up happening with Cedi Osman. Does he go into camp, and is he the guy who's going to be the starting small forward, kind of a guy who can do a little bit of everything at that small forward position or that wing? I obviously want to get the Sexton as well too. But Ben, what's your thought on Osman in terms of how he can contribute to the Cavaliers roster this upcoming season?
Yeah, right. It's funny you said that. I was looking at his name as you said that. I think he proved he's a solid player. I don't know if he'll be the starter. I think they've got a lot of depth that's kind of combo small forward shooting guard. You go J.R. Smith, Kyle Korver, they're all kind of interchangeable, that shooting guard small forward spot. I can't tell you if he'll be the starter, but he definitely deserves a look as a starter. And if he's not a starter, he deserves key minutes.
All right, so let's talk about Colin Sexton. I think that's just what it comes down to. And Ben, I'm going to start with you on this. Colin Sexton, high draft pick. A lot of people are talking about this kid. How much of the onus is really on Colin Sexton to be the face of the Cleveland Cavaliers, or how much of a buffer has he been given because the Cleveland Cavaliers committed themselves to Kevin Love?
I was just going to say that. That's a great point. If they get rid of Kevin Love, you're looking at Colin Sexton as the only marquee name in terms of could he save this franchise. Kevin Love is still an all-star, and he's got that buffer, perfect word to use that. I don't know. Look, you see, Kevin Love is going to be that leader. He's champion, an all-star, etc. Colin Sexton, though, is going to be counted on to pick up the load and do a lot as a rookie that a lot of rookies may not have to do. But Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, unfortunately for guys like Colin Sexton, they've set the bar. You got to be coming, and if you're a top pick and you're 19, you're a one and done. You got to show up. Now, no, Mitchell wasn't a one and done, but you know what I'm saying. They've set the tone that a young guy can come in and dominate in the playoffs like a Mitchell did, like a Tatum did. I think Colin Sexton will be good. My only worry is something that he can't control. He's small. He's not very tall. He's not a big guy, but he's got a lot of heart. Sometimes that replaces that. He's not short. He's 6'2", 6'3", but he's really 6'2", 6'3". There's nothing higher than that. So we'll see. But when a kid's got a lot of heart like he does, maybe height doesn't always matter. Look at Isaiah Thomas, what he's done in his career at times. And he's way taller than Isaiah Thomas. So I'm looking for Colin Sexton to have a big year, and not just offensively. He is a good defender.
Do you think he eventually wrestles that starting position away from George Hill? I mean, is it kind of one of those things where we'll see how the Cavaliers season runs, so to speak? Hill starts off as a starter. Then if it kind of tails off, then maybe they hand the keys over. Do you see that kind of being the situation for Sexton in Cleveland?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you're giving a guy like George Hill, he's making $20 million a year. I don't think people realize that. No shit, no offense to you, George Hill, but he's making $20 million a year. I mean, does he deserve that? Not really. You got to go with him as the starter at the beginning. But Colin Sexton is the starting point guard of that team by the end of the year. I completely think that is a no-brainer. Obviously, bearing injury or poor play, I think you got to give Colin Sexton the keys. But I think it's smart. At least open it up with George Hill. See what happens. Give Sexton some time to mold into his role. But I think that, yes, to answer your question, he should be the starting point guard at some point.
All right. Well, I mean, look, one of the things that we're talking about with the Cleveland Cavaliers is whether or not Tyronn Lue is a legitimate head coach, and he's going to get his chance. He is definitely going to get his opportunity to try and coach this team to be better than what what Westgate is representing right now. Shaw, Westgate has the Cleveland Cavaliers at 30.5. Are you taking an over and under on that?
I'm gonna take the over.
Isn't that insulting? It's just like, damn.
A little bit. It's a little bit insulting. I mean, I think there's some out there who think this is maybe a 7 or 8 seed team in the Eastern Conference. I'm maybe not quite that optimistic. I don't put them even above Detroit and teams like that, even in their own division. But overall, I think they're going to be pretty competitive throughout. But they do have some issues, obviously, that we haven't even discussed, even in terms of Rodney Hood again on the 1-year prove-it deal. Larry Nance, they're going to have to re-up on him as well too. Those two guys, do they stretch and press a little bit to try to make sure that they can get their money this upcoming summer? I think Nance and Tristan Thompson, Lou had said that they're going to oscillate at that 5 position. So depending on matchups, which one of those guys will start. And I'm very interested to see if we get Minnesota Kevin Love. Is it just okay? LeBron's gone. Love is now back to 25 and 15 a night type of situation, or does he still kind of remain in that 20 and 11-ish type of range, which isn't bad? But what type of leader does he become? Because he was also a great passer in Minnesota, and they didn't really utilize that when he was there with LeBron because they didn't need to. But overall, I think this is a team that can definitely beat 30 wins, especially with the collection of talent they have on this team, and how competitive I think they're going to be overall. Ben, where do you stand on Cleveland's overall?
I think it's pathetic. I would go. If I wasn't so young and I owned a house, I'd go mortgage it because I'd go bet on this. They are going to go over 30 games, and I think it's wrong. I think it's a really poor prediction. I think it shows that people think that once LeBron leaves, they're just going to be the dust like last time. No, it's not like that. This team is fine. I think they're a potential playoff team. I mean, I don't think that's crazy. I really don't. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I think that they're a potential playoff team.
They can challenge.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they made the 8th seed.
Yeah, listen, this is going to be a competitive division. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the fact that there's a possibility that 3, maybe even 4 teams will come out of this division to participate in these conference playoffs. And that's how narrow the gap essentially can be. So, all right, let's go ahead and let's get right into it, man. Ben, this is some excellent insight. We really appreciate you jumping on with this. So I'm going to start with you, brother. Where do you see the team slated 5 to number 1 in the Central Division?
I think that what you got to do is you got to have the Bulls at 5. We know the Bulls are going to be at 5. They're a team that I think is going to end up looking competitive in the beginning of the year, but I think they're going to have to realize they're going to tank. I'm going to go at 4, the Pistons. I think that we made a great point that they could either go way high or they could go way low, and I think you made a great point, Shaw. I don't know. I'm not sold on them. And I could see the Cavs being more competitive than them. I could see the Pistons just falling apart. So I'm going to go Pistons. I think that's a gutsy pick. I think most people would say the Pistons over the Cavs. I'm going to go Pistons at 4, just because I think that the Cavs may scratch and claw a win or two higher than them, but we will see. I think, as that said, I'll go Cavs 3. I think the Cavs, I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but I'm putting that out there because I think that they have the kind of team that's going to be competitive. And when you've got heart and you've got soul, like a Colin Sexton has, like a Kevin Love has, and to a lesser degree, Channing Frye. We didn't talk about that. Channing Frye may not play a lot, but he's a huge reason why they won that championship in 2016. He is extremely, extremely good in locker rooms. He divides any kind of divide that there is. He breaks that divide. So Cavs at 3. We'll go number 2. We got to go with the Bucks. I think that the Bucks will be good. I think that they will be a near 50-win team, but I think that the Pacers are just better. So, that goes into my number 1. The Pacers don't have the Greek freak, but they've got Victor Oladipo, who, like I talked about, heart and soul, you can't beat that. And not saying Greek freak doesn't have it. I'm just saying what I have seen in Oladipo is he has a history for constant improvement. He doesn't hit you right off on the scene, but year after year, he gets better and he is committed. I think we see a 23-point per game scorer go to a 27, 28 per game scorer. And I think that they lead that division. So to round it out, the Pacers at top.
And I'm going to go ahead and follow up. I mean, it's going to be slightly different. I think we all agree Chicago is not the elite team in this division. So they're going to finish last in 5th place. It's very interesting because I feel like Cleveland's roster I like Cleveland's overall roster and maybe even total chemistry better than Detroit. But I just have so much faith in Casey and the potential talent of Drummond and Blake potentially together. I'm going to put Cleveland 4th. I'm going to put Detroit 3rd. And then here's my going on a limb. As much as I gushed over the Pacers, I'm going to put them 2nd. And Coach Bud getting the Bucks to win this division. But probably last day of the season type of situation. I don't have the schedule in front of me right now. I don't know if they play each other, but I think the Bucks and Pacers maybe finish within 1 or 2 games of each other. But I'm going to go with the Bucks number 1 only because Giannis, I think, is going to have an MVP type season. CL?
All right. So for me, the Chicago Bulls still have a long ways to go, but I think the fact that we are seeing that this division is going to be very competitive, I think is going to hasten their ability to start seeing the talent start coming to fruition. As far as I'm concerned, this is going to be an interesting situation because I think it's going to be very close when we talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Detroit Pistons. I just don't completely buy into the Cleveland Cavaliers in their starters more so than I'm seeing the development of talent that they have coming off the bench. That means to me, the Detroit Pistons step up. I think they eke out enough wins that they find themselves in the playoff. I think Dwayne Casey as a head coach is good enough to get these guys to play. If they stay solid on their defense, I think the offense will come. The Milwaukee Bucks, while I'm so impressed with them, I just don't see them being good enough to be the best basketball team just yet. And while I like Mike Budenholzer as their coach, he doesn't absolutely elevate this basketball team. I think they lost out big time not figuring out a way to keep Parker on this team. I think it was 1 year too soon before we started talking about making moves away from Parker. This could have been the season that we would have seen the Milwaukee Bucks be the number 1 team if Parker was still on that roster. And that means I think the Indiana Pacers have proven to me that now with LeBron James out of the picture, this is their opportunity to seize. They have so much upside going on. And to your point, Ben, we haven't even seen the bad side of Miles Turner yet. And I think once we get to that point, that could be the type of combination that is the most dangerous to deal with in the Eastern Conference. Excellent, excellent discussion. Ben, we appreciate you hopping on board with us this week to break down the Central, bro. You locked it down like no other.
Of course, I really enjoyed being on. And like you said, this is not a sexy division. They don't have the Los Angeles Lakers, the Golden State Warriors, all these other teams, the Boston Celtics. But instead, it's going to be a competitive team.
I agree with you there, Ben. Yeah, like you said, and just to chime in, I think at the top it's Pacers, Milwaukee, again, 1 or 2 game difference. And then in the middle, same thing, Detroit and Cleveland, 1 or 2 games difference. And, it could go either way. So I think, again, this division has some balance outside of Chicago, and maybe Chicago's healthy. Maybe they surprise some teams and be competitive. Who knows? But overall, I think, again, this was a great show. And Ben, I appreciate you so much for jumping on, man. This was a great time. I hope to have you back on us, hopefully throughout the season at some point.
Of course, I look forward to it.
Definitely. Be sure to check out our man, Ben Stinar. At Ben Stinar, Stinar, beat writer covers the NBA like no other for Amico Hoops. And be sure to check out Amico Hoops at AMICO Hoops. They're one of the premier websites that covers the NBA. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys for checking us out, our 2018-19 preview of the Central Division, and we'll catch up with you next time.